and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton. And today we are going to introduce you to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and talk about some of the great work they're doing to help the health of our bay. My guest is Tanner Council. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You know, there's a lot of organizations out there that work on environmental things. What does the Chesapeake Bay Foundation do? What really sets that group apart?
The Chesapeake Bay Foundation is a nonprofit organization. It is the largest nonprofit organization solely dedicated to restoring, improving, protecting the waters and the watershed of the Chesapeake Bay.
And it's multi-state. It's the whole bay. I mean, I think of it as Virginia because of our piece of the bay, and that's what matters the most, but it goes all the way up.
Absolutely. So we have offices and education centers in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, of course. But the watershed itself stretches across 6 states, which in addition to those 3 states, you have New York, West Virginia, and Delaware, and of course the entire District of Columbia, D.C. So it's 6 states and D.C. that stretches the watershed.
And to some extent, we who live on the water, cities who live on the water, care the most, but those rivers that feed the bay, was it hard to get their attention?
Well, you know,
New York and Pennsylvania, like how much did they need the bay?
Well, it's all about local water quality. It's about the water that's flowing downstream, and the Chesapeake Bay is the repository for all these different waterways, for all these major tributaries. So in Pennsylvania, the name of the game is improving the water flowing into the Susquehanna River. My colleagues I take my hat off to my colleagues who try to say, hey, what about the Chesapeake Bay in Pennsylvania, when maybe they've never even seen the Chesapeake Bay? But you know, we see that problem here too. Even though we drive over it and under it, not everybody understands the incredible economic, cultural, social value of the Chesapeake Bay and its waterways here.
Okay, so what are the key, and I mean, we could probably spend the whole time talking about why the bay is important, but what are some of the key drivers that the bay really does for the region and then also for the wildlife?
Well, I think
sea life.
Crucially, it has an enormous economic value, and whether that comes from fisheries, recreation, tourism, all those are huge economic drivers. And if we were able to unlock those benefits, we would see an incredible increase in revenues across the boards. But you know, we have the cultural and the social, the standard of living. You know,
right.
being and all the food that we eat, and where we go to relax, and why businesses come here and why businesses stay here.
Right. Would our 124 miles of shoreline be as popular coastline if it wasn't clean water? No, absolutely not. Right here in Hampton.
And we see beach closures due to water quality concerns each summer, and those are what keep tourists. You know, maybe they'll go somewhere else next summer if they have to roll the dice and not know if our beaches are going to be open.
Right.
Luckily, we're seeing great improvements in our waterways, which is a very good sign.
And everyone tells us to eat seafood. It is healthy for us, but only if it is a healthy industry, and it's a local industry to Hampton. We care a lot about seafood.
Absolutely, and some of the oysters coming out here, some of the best in the world.
Yes.
And so.
Yes, and we were once known as Crab Town, and I think we could be again. So
absolutely.
2 key, I mean, those industries have kept Hampton afloat after the Civil War, as we were a booming port town. I mean, they're just absolutely key. So have we made progress? I mean, I'm old enough to remember the very dismal warnings, and when the Chesapeake Bay Foundation started giving grades to the bay, and
right.
it was D-.
Yes, so,
it was not good.
So from the kind of the low point in the 80s, when there were moratorium on rockfish, you literally could not eat any more rockfish because the population was collapsing, oysters. We're very, at the Bay Foundation, we give those grades every 2 years, and very, very happy to report that the last 2 grades that we've given have been upticks. So we are starting for the first time to really see the benefits of the Clean Water Blueprint, which is the interstate plan to restore the Chesapeake Bay by 2025. So we're seeing improvements in water clarity. We're seeing grasses coming back, even in this area, which is made to some viewers be surprising, but that is a huge, an incredibly good sign. And we're starting to see our fisheries are in fairly good shape down here. So we're starting to see those benefits now.
How did we get there? What are some of the steps that we as a country, we as a region had to take to get there, and then, what do we still need to do?
Well, there are so many different types of pollution. We could spend the entire show talking about the different types of pollution.
Because you have industrial, you have agriculture, you have yards.
But the three that we are focused on with a laser-like precision are nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. So we can think about that in terms of nutrients, which is basically what we get out from fertilizer and some other sources, and including human waste and pet waste. And then we have sediment, which is a fancy word for dirt. Okay, so that's from erosion, that's from construction sites, that's from people's properties and so forth, and just the very streets we run on. So nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. Getting those levels down to a sustainable amount, not zeroing them out, but getting them.
Those things are natural and they occur in the bay. Nitrogen, the bay needs nitrogen. It just doesn't need as much as dumping in lately.
Nitrogen, phosphorus are essential for life,
right.
But when they are coming into the system in excessive amounts, they do wreak havoc on the system. And specifically, that's where we get the algal blooms that people may see as they drive over the bridges during the summer. And those algal blooms result in what are called dead zones, which are areas of very, very low oxygen where animals and fish and crabs and oysters and everything else are unable to survive.
Yeah, those huge die-offs. And, when the sun can't get through, when there's no oxygen, you're choking life. And people, I think, don't understand that. Like, a little nitrogen doesn't hurt anybody, which is true, but a lot of nitrogen is a big problem.
It's that clouding effect. If you can't get sunlight into the water, the grasses can't grow. Just like the roses or the magnolia tree in your front yard, they need a certain amount of light to grow.
Okay, finish the cycle. What happens when the grasses can't grow?
Okay, so what do grasses create? Oxygen. Mm-hmm. What needs oxygen? Animals. Therefore, you start seeing the collapse all the way down the line. So it's a domino effect.
And they're hiding places, and they attach, some of the bottom creatures attach to the grasses, and it's where crabs feed. And people forget the cycle sometimes. They think, grass,
Right. So underwater grasses and oyster reef are critical habitat for all different types of plants and animals. So we reduce that, and we're starting to reduce those populations, and you have a less productive system.
So what have we done so far? Just a couple of measures. I know you can't talk about everything to reduce that, and what do we do going forward?
So the primary sources of pollution that we work on are, and you touched on them already. We have agriculture, we have urban, and then we have wastewater. So we work very hard at all three of those levels to reduce those, and we do that with working with local governments. We work at the state level, the local level, and we work with citizens to try to improve their practices and to let people know that everything that we do has an impact. Everything we do on land has an impact on the water. So working hard to get the states and then down to the localities to agree to reduce that loading is what we call it. So how much nitrogen, phosphorus, or sediment are coming out of each locality. And that's where we're starting to reduce it, and get it down to a level where the science tells us the bay will be able to handle that amount. Again, we're not ever going to get back to John Smith's time.
Right.
But there's a certain amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment, even an excessive amount, that it can handle and still be a healthy system. So we follow the science.
It's amazing what nature can do, and the way oysters, purify and clean our waters and things like that.
Absolutely.
It can handle a lot.
Absolutely. So we're working with, we do hands-on restoration work. We do a lot of education. A lot of listeners viewers may see that when they were in high school, or maybe their kids now, have gone through a CBF education program. Mm-hmm. And then we do lots of advocacy work, which is a lot of the work that I do, which is trying to get folks connected with their elected officials and with their local governments to understand what's happening. Those changes every time there's a city council meeting. There's usually something that has to do with water quality. So connecting those dots, and connecting those people, and helping people understand that they have a role in reducing pollution.
So sort of getting back to the city council level, and the local level, one of the things people aren't thrilled about necessarily is we have taken a lot of measures because of the bay to change stormwater regulations, to change wastewater regulations, things that have cost taxpayers money but once you fix these things and reduce the runoff, you make the improvements, it will level off. I mean, it's like investing in, a new roof or external upgrades to your house. Once you get that infrastructure built, hopefully it will last for a while.
Yes, and it also, their practices, whether those are building practices or the way that we treat our wastewater, that become par for the course. So when the blueprint started in 2010, it was, how are we going to do this? do we have to do this? And there was resistance, and now
because it's very expensive. I mean, to be honest, it is pricey for taxpayers, for homeowners, for businesses, but there's a payoff in the end,
yes,
which is recreation, seafood, tourism.
We have an economic study out that shows that how much money what is the bay worth, and how much is the bay worth if we do not do anything, if we maintain, if we do the minimum, and if we do what the blueprint is asking us to do, and it unlocks so much money. The benefits of clean water, I think, greatly outweigh these sort of short-term growing pains. And I do think that in hindsight, that we did not understand for a very long time the impact that we were having on our waterways. And in hindsight, we may have developed and built our cities a little bit differently in order to have less of an impact on those waterways, knowing the value of them now.
Well, and that ties into flooding and all the issues that we're having as a city and as all the cities on waterfront right now, kind of figuring out how do we interact with nature in a way that keeps all of us as safe and whole as possible.
Absolutely. So we work very hard year-round to try to get that message out to people, and and I would say that we all have a role, large or small. We all contribute to pollution in one way or another. But the flip side of that is we all have a way that we can give back and help mitigate that impact. So whether that is a little bit on your stormwater bill, or it's coming out and volunteering with the Bay Foundation, and or doing something at your home on your own, whether installing a rain barrel or installing a rain garden.
Right.
There's something that everybody can do, and I think that education is the most important thing. And then if everybody knew and did one little thing, we may not even be in this mess in the first place.
Right. We have learned so much, and you guys have tremendously contributed to the science around the Bay. But a lot of that money has come, I mean, the pain for taxpayers has been obvious, but a lot of the money has come from the federal government because it is a multi-state effort, because it affects, the whole East Coast, basically. In the news recently, that has been in jeopardy. What have you all done? What are the resources and the local legislator working on right now?
Well, so first of all, the new administration, their proposed federal budget zeroed out funding for the Chesapeake Bay program, and as well as the Great Lakes and the Puget Sound and the Gulf.
Right.
But zeroed out funding for those programs. And I want to be clear, the Chesapeake Bay program, that's not the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. That's part of EPA's efforts.
You get some money from that, don't you?
We get through grants.
Through grants and
which are often
efforts.
with partners. The Bay Foundation is privately funded for the most part, but some of our programs, like the work we're doing in Hampton, is funded by National Fish and Wildlife Federation. So, in that case, it was zeroed out. We work very hard with our local with our representatives in Congress. We have 4 down here. So we have Taylor, Scott, McEachin, and Whitman, excuse me, in the 1st District.
So we have both sides of the aisle there.
Both sides of the aisle. Those 2 and 2 are split right down the aisle, and all 4 of them are working very, very hard to have that. And the number was 73 million to have that restored. So as of the recording of this week, that funding has been put back from 0 to 60. So we continue to work with them. We're very, very grateful to those, to our congressmen there for pushing hard, because they know the value of this funding, and they know that it's working. So we're starting to see those results. So we work very, very hard with them to show them, and many of them know already.
Oh, yeah.
And to
but
further,
you need to convince their voters too.
Their voters, and to further work with their colleagues on those different committees to make sure that money is there, because that money is used very, very wisely. It's relative to the federal budget. It's a very, very small amount.
But if we lost
every dollar
those
counts.
federal dollars, private foundations just couldn't make up.
Yes, so some private foundations will suffer, and but and the money that goes into wastewater treatment upgrades, and the money that goes out to farmers to help subsidize practices on their properties, and then again, some of the programs that we're doing here in urban areas would be in jeopardy without that funding.
So Tanner, if people are watching this and think, I want to get involved, what are some ways that they could get involved with the Bay Foundation?
I'm so glad you asked that question. We have a lot of work going on in Hampton this fall, 2017, and there are ways to get involved across the boards. I would just say the easiest way to do it is to call the Chesapeake Bay Foundation's Hampton Roads office. We have a new environmental education center in Virginia Beach. Welcome you to come just stop in.
Oh, fun.
It's beautiful out there, but to get involved with the organization, they could contact me, and I'd be able to show them the variety of volunteer opportunities that we have going on at any given time. I would also say, going back to the education piece, is just to be aware of what's happening locally. So in the city of Hampton, in the state of Virginia, you know, at a federal level, what is happening? Where are the priorities for water quality, and where do those fall? Just knowing is half the battle, to use a cliche.
That's right. And I will also put in a plug for our Hampton's Clean City Commission. They do a lot of work in partnership. They do a lot of education work. They do rain barrel, you know, workshops and things that promote health of the waterways and in the ground.
Yes, so the Clean City Commission here in Hampton, and then there's another committee that's part of that, which is the Hampton Restoration Waterways Project.
They're phenomenal.
I think I've got that right. They are doing incredible work, and they are looking for people to come out and get involved. You can come out, you can do everything from writing letters to getting your hands dirty and putting oysters in the water. I mean, there's all sorts of work that can be done. And again, there's something for everybody to do to help restore these waterways.
And maybe the most universal thing is don't litter. You know, they're out there doing cleanups of litter, and everything in this area is going to end up in the water at some point. It's going to hit a ditch, it's going to hit a creek, it's going to hit a river. It's going to hit the bay.
So, like on Clean the Bay Day every year, which Hampton's a major partner in Clean the Bay Day, you know, we're finding all sorts of stuff in the waterways, and nobody goes, you know, runs to the bridge and throws it over. It works its way into the waterways. You know, litter is really easy to stop. You know, you either pick it up or you don't put it there in the first place. Right. It's much harder to get nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment to pull that out of the water. But littering is, and especially Clean the Bay Day, is such a great first step for people to come out and say, wait a minute, you know, I came out today, I committed a few hours with a bunch of other people, and we got a lot of work done.
And that also then reminds you going forward to change your habits and to convince other people to change their habits. And that's a lot of the educational work you're doing with kids, too.
Absolutely.
You're meeting science SOLs, but you're also teaching them stewardship.
Absolutely. And it's so important just to get people out on the resource, to get them out on the water, you know, just at the shore, just to see how beautiful it is and how lucky we are to have this national treasure right here at our doorstep.
Yep, it's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming by today, Tanner.
Thank you, Robin. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for watching. I hope you've learned a little bit about the work of the Bay Foundation and the importance to Hampton, to the region, to the country of our wonderful Chesapeake Bay and keeping it healthy. Thanks for watching.